Hello, everybody. Gbenga Olatunji here. Today we bring you CSME, Corporate Strategic Management and Ethics, and we are looking at nature of risk under risk management. Risk management will be in series, and we'll be looking at the nature of risk. And what are we going to be looking at when we are talking about risk management and nature of risk today precisely? We'll be looking at the nature, having developed what risk is. We'll look at the two broad categories of risks that we have. Then we are going to talk about responsibility for risk management. That is, who are responsible for risk management. Then we are going to talk about Cadbury's reports, which can be the basis of the definition of what risk is. So description of risk according to Cadbury report, and we are going to be looking at elements of risk management system. When we are talking about elements, we are talking about what are the things that are going to feature anytime we are talking about risk. So those are the elements. And after now, we are going to be looking at categories of risk that are common to different types of businesses and industries. And this categorization is different from the two broad categorization of risk that we are going to be discussing now. So it's a subtopic on its own, and it has about eight thereabouts common different types of risk that we need to be aware of. Risk management as a broader topic now, before we go into the nature of risk. Introducing ourselves to risk management, we must be able at the end of this series, in preparation for our exams or for those that just want to know about risk management for business performance and doing well in their various organizations and endeavor, must be able to explain what risk is and how risk affects our internal and external objectives of the business. Every business must have an objective. So, how does risk affect your business? From the corporate and strategic point of view, the operational efficiency and effectiveness, reliable reporting of risk must understand the legal aspect of risk, the regulatory aspect of risk, especially those people that are in regulated industry, and the ethical compliance of risk. Also, risk management must be able to identify the risk itself and assess risk itself. So this is another subtopic that we'll be looking at. We must be able to measure and prioritize risk. And you know what? We cannot prioritize if we have not been able to identify and categorize them. And that is why we are having the nature of risk and the broad categorization prior to going into all these other details. We must be able to know the role of the board of directors and their functions as it relates to risk management in our organization. We must be able to use ALARP, one of the principles of risk management, as low as reasonably practicable. It's a principle which we are going to go into. So the subjective aspect and the objective aspect of this principle how it correlates with risk factors and their interrelate. Must be able to answer all this. Must be able to evaluate appropriate response to risk that we've identified given a scenario. Must be able to know and evaluate what our inherent risks are and what our residual risks are, the mitigation methods that we want to use, and how adequate and appropriate to the risk identified, whether residual or inherent, and must be able to determine the risk appetite of our stakeholders, of our shareholders also, and how we're going to know all this and be able to do risk appetite analysis. We are going to go into it under this risk management too. We must, at the end of the day, be able to discuss alternative risk approaches in form of mitigation and the like, risk diversification, risk transfer, risk sharing, risk hedging. What are these? We need to be able to answer them well enough. As we go into the details now, if you are new on this channel, James Associate channel, we acknowledge your presence and I'd love that you subscribe right away to the channel so that you will be able to receive timely notification from us anytime that we push out new videos. And if you are returning and yet to subscribe, please go and subscribe right away. So now let's go into the nature of risk. And when we are talking about risk, we must not but talk about is layman definition. And sometimes they say it's risky even not to take a risk. I want to believe that we agree with that. Also, risk is anything that will not allow us to actually see our way clearly in any given objective. Is a risk too. Anything that will not allow us to see our way clearly in whatsoever we are undertaking can be called a risk. So, risk is usually associated with the possibility that things might go wrong. And when we observe that things might go wrong in anything that we are doing, we can say that there is presence of a risk in that business, that venture, or that undertaking. So that event that can turn out not too good, that is the risk factor. And sometimes we can be asked to bring out the risk factor in a scenario. So that's premonition that we have that something is not too right about something. That is the risk we are talking about. However, risk has a broader meaning now. Risk exists whenever a future outcome or future events cannot be predicted with certainty. So anywhere we observe uncertainty, that is risk, and a range of different possible outcome or events might occur. When it seems we could not identify our way clearly in anything, there is an element of risk. So we can categorize risk into two broader forms. And like I said, this categorization is the broadest one in its Next time we'll be talking about 8 other dimensions of categorization. But when we are talking about risk in the generic sense of it, we will be talking about the pure risk and the speculative risk. We'll be talking about the pure risk and the speculative risk. I want to believe that you've taken risk, and we all are taking risk. Now you've taken risk. You try to bank on the internet, and that you will find information that you are actually looking for, and that's why we are all here. But you've taken a risk because there is possibility that the information you are looking for is not available on the internet. So that is a risk. But which kind of risk have you taken now? As we continue, you should be able to answer. I just put that one out to you so that you will know that risk exists almost in everything that we undertake. So we have pure risk and speculative risk. And when we're talking about pure risk, its dimension is that we cannot actually say an outcome will be good. That is, if the event actually materialized and occur, no good thing is expected to happen. It is purely risk or purely risky. Nevertheless, it is risky or riskier not to even take a risk like they used to say. So pure risk, which we can also call downside risk. It's a risk where there is a possibility that an adverse event might occur, and events might turn out to be worse than expected whenever they happen. But they cannot be better than expected. So that is a pure risk. So the example that I gave about someone trying to browse the internet looking for information, can we say now it's a pure risk or speculative risk? Following me, we know now that pure risk is a downright risk, which we can equally call downside risk, in which no good thing is actually expected from the outcome if it eventually happens. So therefore, that risk in trying to browse information on the internet is not a pure risk. It's not a pure risk. So let us establish that as we move on. Now, what is a speculative risk? And of course, somebody may say, okay, so if it's not a pure risk, then in the broader sense of it is going to be speculative risk. Of course, it's a speculative risk. So what is speculative risk? We can call it two-way risk, because the outcome of the future events might be either good, better, or worse than we actually expected. Don't forget, for the pure risk, no good thing is expected. It's just like the saying, can good thing come out of Nazareth? For speculative risk, is two ways. It can be good, it can be bad than expected. So For people that are used to the stock industry, it's a speculative industry where shares are traded, because the tendency is there that the fluctuation will be up, and also the tendency is there that the fluctuation will go downward. And when we say we have a bull, or the bear is outside in the market, yes, so that is example of speculation. So for organizations in which we are part of, one way or the other, complaints might face, or complaints are facing, because risk is a reality around us. Pure risk and speculative risk. And as professional, for sound professional training, you must be able to manage risk. So this topic is important to us: risk management. Pure risk, speculative risk. Both will be combined in an organized setting. And how are we going to manage them? So when we have a pure risk at hand, the risk that can often be controlled, either by means of internal control or by insurance. This risk might be called internal control risk or operational risk. So controls are necessary to manage risk. And when we are talking about pure risk now, another example is the risk that an employee or an individual within an organization can be injured. So it's a downright risk that if it occurs, is going to have a worse outcome. So it's not a speculative risk, it's a pure risk. And we need to have an internal control to checkmate it, and we can categorize it under internal control risk and operational risk, because the more we are more compliant to risk controls and mitigation, the less of it we are going to have within an organization. Speculative risk within an organization cannot be avoided, because risk must be taken into in order to make profit. So the higher the risk, the higher the profit margin that every organization will make. So we cannot avoid risk. We can only manage it for profitability sake. We cannot, because of risk, go out of business. We try as much as possible to manage it. So as a general rule, higher risk should be justified by the expectation of higher profits. I want to believe that we agree as to that. Higher risk must be justified by higher profits. And if we look around us, industries that are very risky gets a lot of returns, higher return and yield. That is the truth. Examples are all around us, but I will not give the example so that I will not be pushing out a speculative risk, so to say. Okay, but we all could guess some of those industries. So speculative risk can be called business risk, because they will always be there in the business. You might call them, they can fall under strategic risk, especially if they affect and impact negatively on the overall goal and objective of the organization It's an enterprise risk also. We can call it an enterprise risk. So we have the strategic risk, the operational risk, which is downside risk, and it's a downright risk also. Well, it could be called downside risk, and we have business risk, which we can call strategic risk. Now, the nature of risk management now. So we are little by little entering the jugular risk management. So we are going to be looking at risk management, especially as defined by Cadbury report. Now that we know what risk is, we need to understand the processes involved in risk management. So risk management is the process of managing both the downside risk. I want to believe we know what risk that is, and the business risk. So when we are talking about risk management, we must talk about the risk management culture, structure, and processes that are focused on achieving possible opportunities, and yet at the same time maximize wealth and control unwanted results. So this is risk management. We can define it as the culture, the structures, and the processes that are focused on achieving the possible opportunity, yet at the same time control the unwanted outcome. And I want to believe we know what the unwanted outcome is. We call it a risk in the business. So risk and return they work hand in hand, and one of the safest way of managing risk is to do nothing. But when we manage risk in such a way, the impact actually will be negative. So we cannot afford to approach risk management from the point of view of doing nothing about it. The safest strategy is to take no risk at all. However, this is an unrealistic business strategy. All business activity involves some forms of risks. Business decisions should be directed towards achieving the objective of the company, and that is the strategic objective: increasing the value, maximizing the wealth of the organization and of the stakeholder, especially the shareholder. And anything that debars, anything that hinders us from achieving it, we call risk. So we must have strategies that we've devised for achieving this objective, and the performance targets must be set. When we are talking about risk management, we must have threshold, risk tolerance, risk appetite must be set and must be well noted by responsible officers, must be monitored. Strategies must be implemented, and management should try to achieve the stated objective and ensure the KPI as per risk management are actually adhered to and achieved. So we will see that in risk management, strategic risk management and operational risk management, they work hand in hand, because risk will affect both the strategic objective and the day-to-day running of the business also. And if anything is happening on daily basis as we run the business and are not well taken care of, we are sure of one thing: is going to affect the overall objective, the profit maximization, wealth creation, wealth accumulation will be affected. So strategic level, operational level, risk must be managed. And that leads us to ask and answer the next question: who takes the responsibility for risk management? Who takes the responsibility for risk management? Code of corporate governance, in which every country has, and every organization must adhere to the corporate code of corporate governance of their country, especially the public limited liability company, or generally public organization, in which we call PLCs here. Listed organizations, they must be law abiding when it comes to corporate code of governance. Why am I taking us to corporate code of governance? It's because the responsibility, the ultimate responsibility of risk management lies with the directors and the board of directors specifically. So risk is a corporate governance issue, and because it's a corporate governance issue, the board of directors must take responsibility to safeguard the asset of the company and to protect the investment of the investors, the shareholders, from losses and value deterioration. So it's one of their ultimate responsibility. And according to Cadbury report in 1992, it described risk management as the process. Don't forget, there's no how we would discuss management without discussing process. So risk management by Cadbury report is a process by which executive management under the board supervision identifies the risk arising from business or businesses and establishes the priorities for control and particular objective. This is according to Cadbury reports. But we can bring some specific information out and words out from this definition. And one is that risk management is a process. Process must be in place when we're talking about risk management. Two, somebody must take responsibility for managing the process, which the ultimate responsible officers are the BODs, the board of directors. The directors must take the responsibility and supervise, and they must be able to identify risk. They must be able to put controls in place or ensure that management team members are able to put control in place, and they must be able to monitor it, and they must be able to receive feedback on implementation of controls. These are responsibility of the board of directors. Somebody may ask, Gbenga, now, oftentimes the directors may not be available to do this, to do that, and the like. Yes, but they have the ultimate supervisory role. So the role can be delegated to the management team members. Other executives can be delegated the responsibility to. Risk management has elements, and when we are talking about elements of risk management, we are talking about things that management of risk involves. We are talking about features, characters, or characteristics of risk management. So what are we going to find in risk management? Coming from what we just discussed, we know one thing, that risk management involves processes. So processes must be established and is one of the critical elements of a risk management system. So there must be culture of risk. That is, everybody must be aware that we are managing risk in this organization. There must be culture of risk. Managers, employees must understand the risk appetite of the organization. And don't forget that the tone for risk management is set by the board of directors, which can be delegated to responsible officers. So there must be culture of risk awareness. There must be processes. There should be system. And when we are talking of system, it's made up of processes. Anytime you hear the word system, please always remember that it is interworking, interrelationship of different independent units working as a singular unit. So processes must come together for the identification, assessing, and measurement of risk, and these form a system that we call risk management system. When risk have been measured, then we can prioritize them in form of putting them into categories based on their impact, frequency of occurrence, and outcome of occurrence if the event eventually materialize. Then we'll be able to control, we'll be able to manage them. So when we are talking about elements of risk management, we must talk about control. I hope we are following. We must talk about risk culture. We must talk about processes. We must talk about communication, because culture of risk awareness entails even communicating to the officers how the ranks and file within an organization must be aware of it. So when we are talking about elements of risk management, communication is an integral part of it. Also, strategy and risk should be monitored. And like they used to say in audit world, that people don't do what is not monitored. That is, if people are not aware or conscious that somebody is going to check on them and their activities, they may choose the option of not doing it at all or not doing it properly. But when they know that somebody is coming and they do not know when the person may arrive or check on the activity, they try to do what they ought to do. In summary, we had looked at the nature of risk, in which we talk about extensively that risk makes sure that we could not see our way clearly in our objectives in anything we want to undertake. Risk are events that when they occur, they can debar us from reaching our expected goal that we've set for ourselves. And the two broader categorization of risk are the pure risk or the downside risk, and also the speculative risk. We have these two combined in our organizations or even our individual lives. That is the truth. Pure risk will always be there, and also there will be speculative risk. One of the speculative risk you've taken now, which has come out to be good now, don't forget, speculative risk has two sides. The event can eventually occur and be good than expected or worse than expected, but I want to believe the speculative risk you've taken to be an agency associate had paid off. And if it does, don't forget to subscribe, share, so that others around you could enjoy this service. We talk about the responsibility for risk management, in which we agree on one thing, that the ultimate responsibility is with the board of directors as per the code of corporate governance of any country. We had looked at the description of risk according to Cadbury reports, in which we can establish some things that for risk to happen, processes must be in place. It must be monitored, it must be communicated. Elements of risk also as contained both in Cadbury reports and other sources have been discussed. And when we are talking about elements, we are talking about what naturally we feature anytime the topic risk management comes up. We may mention of process, we may mention of monitoring, communication, culture of risk management. We make mention of risk awareness. And as we wish you success in your coming exams and career, as the case may be, I'd love that you join us. We hope you join us next time on categories of risk that are common to different businesses, industries, and organizations. We are going to be looking at around 8 of them, and we know that if any question should come out of nature of risk now, you'll be able to answer, and we are going to do justice to categorization of common risk too. From James Associate Gbenga Olatunji FCA, we'll be signing off. We pride ourselves in that. We are value to life, we are value to your business.